So I filmed a short about this a few days ago, and the shorts always get a lot more hits than the long form videos. But I still prefer to do long forms as well, just because a lot of my fellow builders like to hear about the heavier details about what goes into some of these customizations I do. I've given this hilt the name the Guardian, and it's primarily because of the shielded aspect of using three long Corvus shrouds. But also, when it was done, it just had this feel like it should have a gold blade. And I'll get to that in a bit. But I wanted to go into further detail on this specific build. Now, my original thinking and intent was I wanted to make use of the Corvus thin neck parts, but I tend not to like doing predictable builds. So I looked for ways to employ the thin neck. And originally, my first concept for this was going to use the thin neck in the middle and then cut the core in half and run the back half in the grip and the front half up and extend wires and stuff. And then I thought to myself, I hate working on electronics. I don't solder very well. Getting the wires to sit together is always a pain in the butt. And the soldering iron that I had was from the 1990s. So I looked around and talked about it with a couple of fellow builders. And one was like, hey, there's a soldering iron for $11 on Amazon that does everything that the $300 versions do. I had a look, and it had a 4.9 star rating. And then the sleeves, and I watched a couple of videos on how to do simple wire soldering, and realized I was doing everything wrong, and I had bad equipment. So I dropped the money needed and then did a redesign on this where I put the thin neck where I wanted it to and opted to do a crystal reveal chamber, but not a crystal saber build. I still did some cutting in electronics, and if you've seen the short, you've seen that, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But I wanted to go into a little detail first. Now, the back end here is actually pretty much from almost the center line down. This is exclusively Corvus parts, except for the loop. That's a Saber Bay belt loop there. Now, I had originally intended to use this Vire male-to-male connector with the holes because the speaker on lightsaber cores tends to be at the rear. So if you have a completely enclosed rear like this, there's nowhere for the sound to get out. So initially I was using this, and I realized once I had painted the grip and other parts of it black that this didn't quite work very well. So I swapped it out and made a couple of changes and used a black female-to-female version, which I was able to do because I had ordered a couple of extra parts. Like I have both male and female receives for the ends of the Corvus thin neck. So I was able to play around. And both of these felt like they made the hilt just a wee bit too long. Now, this is a slender build to begin with, so it looks longer than it actually is, but visuals are more important than measurements when you're seeing these things on screen. So I was worried about sound not coming out. And then I realized I'm an imbecile because since I now have this really nice expose in the middle, which opens up the core, the sound comes out the center perfectly. So I did not have to worry at all about sound loss. So I was able to go with what I had originally wanted, which was a thin line on the pommel by using a Corvus recessed male-to-male and then simply spray painting it and gloss coating it. Now, Corvus parts all come in this nice polished aluminum, which means the Corvus grip here had to be painted with black etching primer and then semi-gloss clear coat, a couple of layers of each. and then dried with a heat gun so everything pulled down tight. And also, this copper that you see down here in the thin neck assembly, it's actually copper tape. It's conductive. It's used not only to adhere to conductive surfaces, but also is used to keep snails out of planter pots because they don't like crawling across the surface. It's an inexpensive purchase. It's just a little bit of trimming and some careful application, and there it is. Pop, pop, pop. This is permanent marker that once you rub the top off, you get it nice in the lines, and it pulls the details out really well. Now, further modifications I had to do outside of simply painting was I had to drill and screw mount these two castrol shields. So now I have this beautiful backhand grip which fits the fingers perfectly. So it automatically gives you a nice guide to your hand to sit in place. Further mods, these uprights. I did these. These used to be part of a grip sleeve, which I had cut down for other use. So these are individually trimmed and individually mounted. And yeah, they are kind of rough, but I've filed and sanded them as smooth as I can get them. But I left them looking a little bit rough, a little bit used, as if they're already worn from practice and use. I wanted this to look like a well-kept, but also a used saber. So we've also got Corvus parts here and here. Now we get into the paint work that I've done. We have paint here, Vire crystal chamber exposure, and this is Vire's thruster switch emitter. It's an emitter and a switch as a single piece, painted once again with copper tape. And when I was taking some beauty shots of it, it fell. So the tape, of course, has a small bit of a scratch in one side. But like I said, I wanted this to look like a well cared for piece, but also especially a used piece. So we've got another one of Corvus's very long shrouds attached up the back, and that also gives a guide for the hand. So if I'm using this two-handed, this sits in the palm beautifully, and you can see the ring finger has access to the control, and then the other hand would fit in place underneath here. Also, thanks to my friend Byron, I've got a beautiful blade cap to go in here, and many, many thanks to my very talented miniature painting buddy, Seth, who did this great job of just adding that little paint accent to make it pop. Now, about all the electronics complaining that I was doing in the first few minutes of this video.
Power on.
Buried in here is an accent pixel. It's not up here, because that would be pretty bright. I only wanted a mild amount of illumination, just some coming up from the bottom, almost like, status lights or something like that. So buried in here, you can just barely see it. That's an accent pixel that I cut the lines and soldered directly into the connection between the circuit board, which is visible right here, and the emitter puck for the pixels up top. So you've got this nice, subtle little lighting, which is only visible under certain conditions. But it's just that little, almost secret clubhouse ad kind of thing, where, it's just a little intimate addition that just sort of finishes the piece beautifully. But here we have it. The Guardian. Possibly one of my best builds. Certainly one of my most parts involved builds. There is about 20 parts of just hardware. And took quite a bit of thinking, quite a bit of redesigning, quite a bit of work. But here we are.